So in this presentation, actually this paper I had put it together for International Transport Forum. There was a roundtable discussion on inequality, social inclusion and mobility. So this paper I had prepared in 2016 for that. And when Herman asked me to talk to you all today, so I thought let me just share what I had prepared, which is just 1.5 couple of years earlier. So basically the whole discussion is about urbanization is taking place in many places, especially in Asia, Africa, and especially in South Asia. Urbanization is happening now because we have only 30 in India. We have only 30% people living in urban areas. 70% still lives in rural areas, and it is increasing now. So in fact, if you just look at the sheer numbers, by 2040, we will be adding same number of people in urban areas that we have today. So from 300 million, it will become 600 million. So it's just be doubling the number of people who are going to live in urban areas. Africa is still a little slow, but urbanization is increasing there also. So as compared to the Western European countries and also North America, where urbanization is almost 80-90%, in many of these economies it is happening now. So how we handle our urbanization becomes very important. And one important aspect that is happening in many of these countries and cities, where we have many mega cities now, more than 10-15 million people living in a city, lot of people live in informal areas. So there are always different names for it. Informal areas, slums, you have favelas in Latin America. So there are all kinds of different names for it. But this is, some of the key aspects that many of the international reports have recognized now. They are talking about it. Accessibility to employment, urban poor facing special poor access problem also, and what is fair access to employment and other facilities. So these are all many points of discussion. So 2000 onwards, there has been a lot of discussion on this, lot of UN reports, UN Habitat report, trying to understand what is happening with urbanization and people living in informal economy, and we don't have any megacity where you don't have informal sector. So how do we handle it? In India, when I started actually looking up what's happened, that it's very interesting that in fact since 1950s, so first what is called slum. Slum is basically the same thing where people are living where they should not be living. By a formal legal master plan, the area is not marked for people to live, but many people end up occupying that space, building their own housing and start living there. And so in the subsequent slides I will show you what is our understanding, why is this compulsion, why we have to live there. But this problem was recognized very early on, that we are making all these formal plans, but this informal sector is also growing at the same time. So in 1956, at the central level, we had what was called Slum Area Improvement and Clearance Act. So central government in 1956 recognized this as a problem, and they started thinking that this is a serious problem, we have to deal with it, how to keep our cities clean and not be invaded with slums. So, and in 2011 when we see, this is all government numbers only, what is the percentage of slum population in different states of India? And you see the red color is showing that where you have more than 25% people living in slums. This actually is also showing that there are many states where we have a lot of people living in rural areas. So those are the places where you have also less people living in. So by definition, slum population is in urban areas, because that is where these poor people come to most of the time they are coming to cities in search of employment. The cities and the master plans, formal master plans, do not have formal plans where they can be accommodated. There is a acute shortage of housing, and also wherever the housing is, it is not answering their access issue and access to employment. So they end up creating their own housing and locating themselves wherever it is. So some of the slides I'm going to skip because otherwise this will become too long. This is also showing that in some of our major cities, so Mumbai and Delhi now today have almost similar population, and again you see in Mumbai almost 40% population lives in slum areas. Here are some pictures, what they look like. So this is a picture in Chennai where a lot of poor people have located themselves, where by legal master plan they should not be. So as I show you some pictures, you will start seeing some pattern to it. So you see this very dense, closely packed. In fact, you mostly see the roofs, and there are streets, but streets are mostly not more than 2 meters or 3 meters wide, so it is mostly for pedestrians. You see in Mumbai, very similar picture. Again, very dense, and this again you can see, you can't even see the streets, but of course there is a lot of walking places here. And these are informal settlements in Delhi. So you can see one striking thing, that the pattern is very similar, very high density. And here in this picture also you see at the back there are these formal multi-storied buildings. So those are according to some formal plans. In this one, but this in Chennai also you can see. So these high density, low income settlements are very much inside the city. And in a way they are coexisting with the formal sector. This map is of Delhi. So this map is basically the little dots that you see in these maps. This is showing where the slum population, several slums are located. So I think what is actually quite striking here is that you see the formal road network, the formal plan, and all these informal settlements where poor people are living or slums are, they're very much part of the formal landscape. They are not really outside the city, they are very much spread all through. Similar thing you find in Mumbai also. Again, these colored pockets that you see, those are the locations where these informal sectors live. So this is an interesting map. Actually, this is what one of my students tried to study also. That if you see actually closely, this is a Google map, but what you see here in this land use pattern is clearly two types of settlements. One looks very straight-lined, organized, but right next to it you see extremely dense and very fine network, and rather not straight lines, little informal. So the understanding here is that wherever we have these formal planned settlements, there are these, I would not call them unplanned, but these are self-planned. These are mostly planned by people who are living there. They end up locating there, extremely high density, and then they organize themselves so that they can have better access to work. So just actually looking from Google Maps, you can very easily make out where the slums are and where the planned settlements are. You see the differences in density, you see the differences how the streets are planned. And since 1956, the first act that I came across, there have been several attempts to clean the city, and not just Delhi. In fact, the first attempt was done in Chennai. It was a World Bank project. And then they followed it up in Bangalore, and then Mumbai and Delhi, and not once, several times. that you clean up the city, we need these spaces for some development project or the other. It could be expanding the road infrastructure, it could be beautifying the city, it could be making structures for Asian Games, for Commonwealth Games, etc. So this recent one, which was done in 90s, also in the name of cleaning the city, reducing the air pollution, because a lot of industries which were there, also part of this, they were asked to leave the city boundaries because the air was getting polluted. And in the process, a lot of people who were employed in these cities and living in these slums also had to be relocated. So the relocation part was that you tentatively see here the little dots are the places where they were red dots, where they were living earlier, and green dots are where they were moved by government. And in this process, actually the government gave them, each family, which was, and there were some criteria, they had been living there for 20 years or 15 years, then they were entitled to this small piece of land, and each household was allocated 12 square meters. It used to be earlier in 50s 25, then it became 18, and finally when it was done in mid-90s, it became only 12 square meters, and it was not for free. They still had to pay some small amount of money. And then they would have legal rights to that small piece of land. So it was very interesting that in few meetings which were held, some of these people said that, we would like to invite the authorities who are giving us this piece of land, that we would like to invite them to our village and we can give them bigger piece of land for free. We don't need this money, without charging any money. So we have not come to the city to get a piece of land. We have come to the city to have access to employment. And if you are going to move us out, something between 8 to sometimes 20 kilometers away, so this is how the whole plan was done. Everybody was living within that red area was moved away. And so it was just, just tracing how it has happened, 50s, the first act that I saw. So first whole discussion in 1950s was, we need to make low-income housing. We need to provide housing for low-income people who are coming to the city. Then in 70s, there was again a lot of discussion. We need to rehabilitate, we need to do a lot of rehabilitation, clean the city. But the rehabilitation is still in terms of providing housing. Then in 1980s, there were a lot of non-governmental organizations which were involved also in the process. There were a lot of community development programs, and there was also a discussion about provide some easy finance to these people so that they could make their own housing. And then you see 2000 onwards, there is a lot of discussion of private sector participation to provide low-income housing. But has it solved the problem? Not really. And this is also, we have, so in this 4 types of things that were done since 1950s to 2000, what is the impact? When you talk only about land and housing and rent control act, you have deteriorating housing stock. Then you have clearance and eviction every time, and what does it end up being? New slums are formed after some time. Then you start talking about upgradation and redevelopment. There are a lot of commercial interests because they want to grab that area and make it into bigger malls, etc. So that also does solve the problem. And then recent initiatives again have been that we need to do housing differently. And 2014 onwards, our current government doesn't want to talk about master plans, but they're only talking about smart cities. And where is the discussion in smart cities about this? I showed you that number, it's sometimes 25 to 40% people in Mumbai living in these places. What is their place in smart city discussion? None. Because smart city by definition means that you should be talking about technology, you should be talking about data, but not this kind of discussion. So this is how it has evolved over the years. And now let me show you, because we actually started, there have been 2-3 different studies where we have tried to document the impacts. So what's happened? When the people have been evicted, shifted out, the pedestrian streets have actually disappeared, and many of those places have been converted to parking for cars. And so this also, a couple of studies have documented that when people are living together in these places, there are common social activities. 50% residents know each other, their neighbors, etc. But once you start moving them away, all these social cohesion is lost. One of my PhD students actually documented that how it has impacted the mobility patterns. So you see the red line, it was before relocation, and blue line after relocation. What's the impact? After relocation, travel time increases, travel time to job, and cost to job also increases. And also same thing you find in the lower graph also, before as compared to before relocation, after relocation you're spending more time per bus. After relocation, distance to main road increases, and it's important because on the main roads you have all the public transport systems. So access to public transport becomes more difficult. As you can see in the other side, average distance to bus stop earlier was 200 meters, but then it becomes at least a kilometer after relocation. And so access to public transport becomes more difficult. So in fact, it is basically the poor people. So how are people traveling? You see the people with lowest income in red color, most of them are walking. Because for them, even subsidized public transport is too expensive. So this is actually one of the most important reasons why people locate themselves in a place which is close to work, where they can access employment without spending money. But the formal plan doesn't plan for that. And there is a lot of discussion, oh, you can solve this problem by make metro system, make public transport system, but none of it is free. And for this income group, even subsidized bus transport is too expensive. So metro is out of question for these people to use. And that is what we have realized now that we have more than 200 kilometers of metro in Delhi. It is not used by poor people. So in this, people who are living in these places, 76% depend on informal employment. Informal employment means these are mostly self-generated. They are not, they don't have regular salary coming from somewhere. These are small businesses or they are daily wage earners. So it's mostly these kind of people. And there is still a difference between within this group also people who are employed and people who are unemployed. And obviously people who are unemployed are more dependent on walking. So if they have to go around looking for even casual work, there is no other way but to walk to find such things. So you see a typical, scene of one of these settlements, and mostly people dependent on walking, and there are a lot of these, kind of small business activities which is getting them not a regular income but some small income to survive. So most of them, we tried to actually understand who what distances people were traveling, how much time they were spending and how much money, and both between formal, informal and school trips, amount of travel by students. So you find that for public transport, for people who are employed in formal sector, they can afford public transport much more than people who are in informal sector. So this is again trying to understand the same thing in a different way. Here we try to see what is called a tour. So instead of trip, you leave your home in the morning and you just go to your work and you do some other activities and then come back in the evening. So that is what is defined as a tour. So now how much different types of distances and tours that people are doing. So again we find that people people employed in informal sector, their percentage of tours of shorter distances is much more as compared to others. So what is basic characteristic of these informal settlements? They are self-organized, they have mostly organic growth, and the reason they are called slums or JJ cluster or informal sector because they are outside the formal process. When we look at a master planning document, there are no proper guidance that how to deal with this sector. Also in these places, there is lack of formal services, so there is a problem of water, sewage, electricity, so basic hygiene is missing. And government's attitude is, that they should not be there, therefore we cannot provide them these services because they are defying the formal master plan. And housing is also poor quality. But what is striking in these self-organized system is high density. It's completely mixed, so people are living and working at the same place. And you have small businesses, workplace, employment, informal employment, all happening at the same place. So in new urbanism, what we call diversity, that is exactly what exists there. And also it's very human scale. No street is wider than 2.5 to 3 meter wide. Most people are walking. And most important actually is this, what is written the last one, location. And location is not about getting housing, location is all about access to employment. So all the series of policy document summaries that I showed you, 50s to 2000, those us experts are still talking about solving their housing problem. And whereas again and again they are showing it is not housing problem, it is access to employment. And access by means which does not include money. So you can solve my access problem by providing very good metro and public transport, but that doesn't solve my access problem. Because then I have to spend more than 10% of my income on travel. So location and access, how to employment becomes extremely important. And there have been more documentation in recent times also. So what's happened to places which have been evicted? And most recent one, this publication showed that 20% of that area remains vacant. 19% has been used for roads and parks, parking, 14% for parks and playgrounds, 9% government infrastructure, and then 7% new slums get formed. So we evict people, and there is this whole cycle, and it's interesting that last 50 years we continue to do the same thing. So this is, I think, again, all our current experts, basically talk about that we should, when we want to do a more livable, sustainable cities, we have to provide density, we have to provide structures which are not monocentric, they should be polycentric, should be mixed land use, diverse, and there should be a lot of design which encourages short trips. That's precisely what happens in these places. But the as far as the experts are concerned, they are illegal. They should not be there. So there is very little documentation or learning from these self-organized systems. So the key questions are, can subsidized transport improve accessibility? And what other thing also we documented in some of these case studies was that especially women get adversely affected because the women also have not just money poverty, also time poverty, because they are multitasking all the time. You have to look after household chores and you also have to do some productive activities, income earning activities. So the moment you start providing separation, time and distance separation, you start increasing time poverty also. And the destination of low income household is very often planned formal residential settlements of high and middle income households. This is also important, that many of these low income people in fact are going to work where the middle income and high income housing locations. So in our formal very nice 4-step model, when we are looking at, we say this is people living, this is people working. It's different. It's not the same definitions for them. And the third point I already explained. So I think that is what I think we have to start learning from many of these things. The 3 most important learnings are really that link between livelihood, housing and mobility is a very strong link. And the whole discussion, if we keep to one aspect of it, either solving mobility problem or housing problem or employment problem, then we don't solve it. There is a strong link between all 3. And a lot of learnings from these self-organized systems, how they are doing multiple use of space. Same house becomes a workplace, and in the evening it is their living quarters, very intensive use of space. So there is a lot of learning from there also. And also, in formal system we say make nice parks and greenery, but it is really for social cohesion. And there are a lot of community spaces that these kind of settlements create, which may not be nice, beautiful green parks, but they encourage a lot of community cohesion. So a lot of learning has to be done from there also. And what is clear is that the answer that is coming from the formal sector, keep them 30 kilometers away because that's where the land is cheap and we can give them some piece of land where they can live, this clearly has not solved the problem.
Thank you.